Selected reading: Freedom's Embrace, an historic romance of the 1750s. From the novel Freedom's Embrace by Kate Greene. Script by Ralph Fucetola and Karen Horbatt, currently being developed by Real Potential Media. Narrator: Based on historic evidence regarding the physical and social setting of colonial Philadelphia, our tale revolves around Abigail Stewart, the mostly dutiful daughter of a leading city minister. Abigail is a new type of woman, better educated with strong opinions. She is just about too much for her very traditional father, Reverend Stewart, to handle. He plans to marry her well to old Dr. Stone, a friend of Ben Franklin and himself. While the men are planning her life, she has different plans. She is not at all happy about marriage, but all of the men her own age chasing after her are just not right, especially that Mr. Reynolds with his aristocratic airs. He is impossible. But fate continues to throw them together as the storms of revolution just begin to peek over the horizon. It is the summer of 1754, and a delegation of leading Pennsylvanians, led by Dr. Franklin, are on their way to Albany, New York, for the very first attempt to bring all the British colonies together for their common defense. Dr. Franklin will propose a plan of union among the colonies. His ideas will be accepted by the colonials, but never approved by the Crown. In just 22 years, those ideas will lead another generation to embrace not just union, but independence as well. Philadelphia in the mid-1700s is one of the most advanced cities in the Western world, with innovations such as street lighting. It was one of the wealthiest and best educated cities as well. Its multiple cultural, national, and ethnic population brought a vibrancy that reflects modern values. Politics is a favorite subject at the workers' taverns as well as in the drawing rooms of the wealthy. Abigail, though not born to wealth, moves in those circles as the daughter of the minister of a mainline church patronized by fashionable Philadelphians. She is never shy about expressing her opinions. Early on, she lightly chides Reverend Stewart. Abigail: "Oh, Father, I've heard those men with their secret handshakes and those naughty meetings in certain upstairs tavern rooms. Those lodges, as they call them in pretense of being stoneworkers, drinking and talking about rebellion, justified as it may be." Narrator: Nor are the other women, white or black, unwilling to speak freely. Elderly Mrs. Giles, reputed to descend on her mother's side from a family slave, never held back. Mr. Reynolds was speaking to the other gentleman. Mr. Reynolds: "I would hope that former slaves would always vote for freedom, and I think it far more likely that they will vote their interests than that the gentry will vote their interests for them. Yes, I would give former slaves the right to vote. I would have no slaves at all." Mrs. Giles, challengingly calling into the room from the doorway: "And would you give women that same right?" Narrator: The gentlemen stop their whispering and stare. Mr. Reynolds flushes and searches for words. Mr. Reynolds, graciously: "Well, I presume they are represented in their husbands' votes." Narrator: Anne Giles purses her lips. Mrs. Giles: "You men are cowards in the face of tyranny." Narrator: She turns and walks back up the hallway, passing Abigail, who stares at her in awe. Some weeks later, after Abigail's wedding and widowing, she is staying with the Reynolds as her portrait is painted. Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds, ushering his father into the dining room: "Father, this is the widow Stone, Reverend Stewart's daughter, Abigail, and the painter Carl Venezio. Mrs. Stone, Signore Venezio, my father Alexander Reynolds." Polite nodding and murmuring. Mr. James Reynolds: "Come, brother. After your long trip from Virginia to Pennsylvania, you must be famished. Please join us at our repast." Narrator: Alexander Reynolds joins the group and some small talk ensues, during which he surprises Nathaniel. Lydia Reynolds: "Signore Venezio." This sketch of Abigail is wonderful. It captures her beauty, her youth, and a touch of sadness. She is truly Persephone. Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds. Yes, the myth of feminine freedom lost, a goddess of beauty and fecundity captured by the Lord of Death, Pluto, and held for a time in Hades. Abigail, internal monologue. This hits too close to home. Narrator. Nathaniel's father is smiling at him and smoothly turns the conversation. Mr. Alexander Reynolds. Yes, a goddess of vegetative growth, certainly. 'Tis nearly summer and the fields are full of growth. Affairs at our plantation are well in order. Your mother and I have much on our minds. It is time for you to take up your position in Tideland society. Son, we propose a wonderful match for you. You must remember Claudia Dandridge Lee, a lovely young lady from a very good family. Narrator. Nathaniel looks aghast. Abigail, internal monologue. He does not seem happy at that. Let's see him wiggle his way out of marriage if he can. Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds. Father, this is unexpected and most inopportune. I am already bespoken. Narrator. There is a gasp from Nathaniel's aunt and uncle. Mr. Alexander Reynolds, unconvinced. Well then, son, who is the lucky lady? Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds, looking about a bit frantically. It is this lady here, Mrs. Stone. We plighted our troth after the untimely death of Dr. Stone. It was love at first sight. We just secretly pledged marriage before a Quaker preacher. Even her father, the Reverend Stewart, doesn't know. I wanted to surprise you and Mother. Narrator. Abigail chokes on her wine. Nathaniel kicks her gently under the table. His aunt and uncle look about ready to burst. Mr. Alexander Reynolds, still unconvinced. Mrs. Stone is indeed an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Madam, what have you to say about this revelation? Lydia Reynolds, quickly to Abigail, shaking her head and mouthing silently. Play along, dear. Abigail, not quite sure she wants to continue the charade. My dear Mr. Reynolds, father-in-law-to-be, it has been so exceptional. I hardly know what to say. Nathaniel swept me off my feet, à la Francaise, but the delicacy of the timing prevented us from announcing the betrothal. Mr. Alexander Reynolds, reappraising the young woman. Tell me, young lady, about yourself and your family. Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds, taking over the conversation. Father, Mrs. Stone, is the daughter of one of Philadelphia's leading ministers of the First Presbyterian Church, the same denomination as our family. She was educated in England, where her sister Julia married a nobleman. She is the widow of a leading Philadelphian. She reads and tutors Latin. My wife is a lady of many talents. Mr. Alexander Reynolds. Well, my congratulations then. When will you two travel to Virginia? I must return to Philadelphia tomorrow on business and then back home. When may we expect you so we can properly introduce you to society? Repeat. Mr. Nathaniel Reynolds. In 3 weeks, Father. But for now, it is getting late, and I and my lady will retire early. Uncle James has some excellent 40-year port in his den that I am sure you will appreciate. Father, uncle, ladies, an evening of surprises for all. Narrator. They stand from the table, and Nathaniel leads Abigail out of the dining room and toward the upstairs bedrooms. Narrator. Treason and freedom are both in the Philadelphia air. Our protagonist, Abigail, crosses paths with the likes of Benjamin Franklin and other leading thinkers of the day. They are shocked, surprised, and enchanted by this new breed of woman. Whatever comes to be, though, fate intends Abigail and her friends to face it together. In colonial Philadelphia, aristocrats, ministers, doctors, and their ladies mix with tradesmen and tradeswomen, seamen, roustabouts, and the city's large Negro population, both free and slave. The miniseries consists of 4 parts. Part 1, a young woman of colonial Philadelphia, scenes 1 through 18. Part 2, an arranged marriage, scenes 19 to 35. Part 3, Abigail's wedding, scenes 36 to 48. Part 4, The Widow Stone, scenes 49 to 67. Comments from other authors. J.P. Farrell, award-winning film producer, best-selling author, CBS Simon & Schuster. Quote, hurtling across time from the hearts of progressive women of yesteryear, Freedom's Embrace will strike a chord with an international demographic of contemporary women passionate about revolutionizing all segments of modern life. Well-written, provocative, and profoundly entertaining, Freedom's Embrace will surely be embraced by today's savvy audience. Judge Andrew P. Napolitano, devoted neighbor and friend, best-selling author. Quote, Kate Greene loved colonial history and freedom. When in deep conversation with her about that era, one realized she had a map of colonial Philadelphia in her head. Her novel, Freedom's Embrace, brings the reader into the world of the 1750s in what was the greatest of the colonial cities at that time. It was an exciting time, with the great events of the Revolution just over the horizon. Experiencing them with Abigail Stewart, a surprisingly modern woman, was a pleasure. This is historical romance at its best. Nancy Orlin Weber, RN, best-selling author of The Life of a Psychic Detective. Quote, Kate Greene wrote compelling and emotional prose. In Freedom's Embrace, she brings her readers into the particulars of Philadelphia's colonial past. With her characters, you experience the sights, sounds, smells, and relationships of the men and women, rich and poor, free and slave, city and country. The modern reader will identify with Abigail's struggle to assert her autonomy in a world that expected women, especially young unmarried women, to accept a subordinate role in society. Not Reverend Stewart's daughter. She was having none of that. As an exemplar of the generation that gave birth to America's revolutionary cohort, what she experiences as a young woman in the 1750s will echo into the great events of 1776 and thereafter. Jacqueline Platinum Mency. I knew Kate Greene for over 20 years and appreciate her skillful writing. I have been in the entertainment industry for over a half-century, part of Blondie's original backup, working with many celebrities. In my opinion, this script about a strong woman in colonial times will resonate with women today and will achieve both critical acclaim and box office success.